Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really thrilled and honored to have with me as my guest Thomas Kostigen, who's a best-selling author, a motivational speaker, and has written a fantastic new book with Robert Downey Jr. called Cool Food. Thomas, welcome to the program.
No, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, before we jump into this really interesting book that you've co-authored, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background for my audience's benefit.
Sure. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, as we were talking before we started the program. So went to undergraduate school there, graduate school there, and then just went into journalism straight from graduate school in DC for a while, covered government agencies, things like the Securities and Exchange Commission and Congress, and really eye-opening to get a sense of what it's like to be in these congressional meetings, which is, I think, an eye-opener for everyone to go see. So I covered that, and then I went to New York and started writing for a lot of different magazines, which was a lot of fun in the 1990s. And from there, I ended up moving out to LA and continuing to do some work in journalism and some other like longer form writing. And that brought me into some documentary work. And then I started doing more opinion-based writing, just because I felt like I needed to say something and be more prescriptive in my journalism. So I started to do things that I felt like made a difference and mattered and provided solutions to people, as opposed to just this quote unquote objective journalism. And that brought me into book forms. And my first, book came out just after An Inconvenient Truth. It's called The Green Book. And when you're walking out of the theater of An Inconvenient Truth, if you remember that documentary by Al Gore, wondering, oh my God, what's going to happen to the world? Because I think for a lot of people and a lot of us, we were saying, wow, we didn't know about this. We didn't know about global temperature rise. We didn't know about global warming of the hockey stick over periods of time that shows the gradual rise in temperatures. And I just happened to have a book that provided hundreds of solutions to this problem, this existential threat. And it became, a big thing. And we had a lot of friends and colleagues and contributors, some of the biggest celebrities and names and, people from the world of sports and entertainment and politics and others who joined in this book and contributed, what they thought, things could be like in a perfect world. And so that brought me on this journey, really, of writing about issues that mattered more, social issues and everything from a lot of them revolve around the environment, but other things that involve, subsidies and policies. And I've done some work at RAND as a commentary editor for, a lot of, really bright minds. And done other columns for a lot of different publications from, Discover Magazine to USA Today. So it's been an interesting journey that brought me to here and now. And we're having a lot of fun with the book. And we think it can make a big impact because it's a space that's, I think you're hearing more and more about the food space and agriculture just becoming an issue, whether it's due to inflation, whether it's due to some type of contamination issue, or whether it's due to, organic labeling or sustainability. So food is really taking, I think, more of a front and center approach. And as energy starts to get addressed, especially in the context of climate, people are now looking at food.
Yeah, for sure. Well, how did you get Robert Downey Jr.'s involvement in this? Were you working with him on another project? How did that happen?
Yeah, Robert and I have known each other for, some time now, and he's read all of my books. And one of the books that really stuck with him was, we were trying to do other projects over the years based on some different ideas that we had. And he has a foundation called Footprint Coalition that's in the climate technology space that invests in a lot of cutting edge things, as Tony Stark might. And in the fictional world. He does that in the real world and does a real lot of good with the Footprint Coalition. So I wanted to give him a shout out on that. And then when I wrote a book called Hacking Planet Earth, which brought me all around the world to interview the brightest minds of today who are trying to address different threats, whether it's water scarcity, whether it's food scarcity, whether it's, other things that are impeding our lives. And they have technologies that can solve a lot of these issues. So it was fascinating to go around and talk to these Thomas Edisons or Nikola Teslas of today and see what they're doing. And Robert loved that book, and we decided we were going to do something with it in the television space as a series. So, we started working on that. And then in the course of just, development and coming up with ideas and episodes and whatnot, we're walking along the beach up in Malibu, and it just occurred to us that we could do a book that would last beyond the film or the TV series, that people could have in their homes and turn to, that would make an impact. Not that we're not going to do any of these other things, but we felt like this could be an interesting piece of media that could make a real difference to a lot of people. Mostly because we were looking at seaweed, and we had just had a miso soup lunch, and we were talking about the benefits of seaweed because an article had just come out about, it being a climate killer. And that really got us, to start talking more and more about it, and then ideating. And then clearly over time, it became a thesis. And then that thesis turned into a real project that we said, oh, okay, I guess we're doing this. And then we jumped into it.
So did the TV series get put on hold, or is that out? And there, or
we're still working on that now.
You're still working on it. Okay, got it. And how did you, so what was it like collaborating with him on the book? How did you divide the responsibility? He wrote one chapter, you wrote one chapter. What was that like?
Yeah, no, great question. Robert's an extremely creative individual and thinks way outside the box. And I'm a, word count per day type of writer who has been a journalist with deadlines forever. That's all I've ever done. So for me, it was great to have this experience of, okay, what are we going to write about? For example, here's the topic. You take an idea of like how this could manifest as words, and I will take an idea of how this can manifest as words, and let's come to the middle. And I felt like I was really pushed to my creative limits with him in a really great way, and ended up going over to his tent and looking at things from that perspective, because I think we all get conditioned when we do things in sort of a quotidian manner in any job that we do. And, having written thousands of articles and pieces, it's tough to get outside that box and take a look at writing differently. So, Robert's mantra for the book, a book, remember, which I wrote 11. He was like, we should be able to open to one page, put it down, and never have to take another look at the book again, and still be able to have a conversation about it.
Interesting.
One page in the book. So that to me was a challenge, because I was thinking, well, wait, there's a narrative structure to books, and we have to have, a beginning, middle, and an end that's sensical, and, bring the reader on a journey like any other writer or communicator would think. And this really kind of threw me into a different structure set, which was really healthy. And I think was fun, and that's how we started approaching everything. So even the design of the book is totally like punk rock, pop art, something very different that you would not expect in a food or a science-related book. Even a cookbook, it's really, really avant-garde in terms of the way it looks and feels, and some of the reaction is you get to look at people's faces and like, this isn't what I expected. It does what we wanted to do. And it gets you to take a look at the book from its cover as a piece of art, which is what Robert wanted. And from my perspective, I was always like, okay, that's a good entryway. We have a really like provocative display. So if I'm walking through the bookstore, this is kind of how I always think about it, and I spot it, I'd be like, oh, that looks interesting. And the next thing is, oh, it's by Downey. That's interesting, and Kostigen has a little credibility in the space, so let's open this up. And then there's recipes and fast facts and interviews and science and history and lists and just a lot of useful, prescriptive, positive information, underlying positive, because that's what we wanted.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing that we tried to weave throughout the whole book, was this positivity.
Well, let me ask you, because that was kind of my next question is, I mean, look, this topic is wide open in terms of food and, and so forth. How did you narrow down what you were going to cover in this book? I mean, it could have been, this book could have been 1,000 pages. I mean, if you want to include science and stories and history and interesting, I mean, it could be gigantic. How did you even narrow it down?
Because the whole idea again goes back to Robert, was okay, we walk into a grocery store, and then it's almost like an improv thing, and then he's like, go. So what would you do, right? So you have to just, you can never say no, you can never have a negative, you have to take that and turn it into a positive. And so the positive approach was, okay, I would go to the outside aisles of the store or the center of the store. And so we have this whole discussion about where the fresh fruits are and vegetables. And then you go into what types of vegetables. And then we decided, okay, there's only about 80 varieties of vegetables at the grocery store. There are thousands of edible plants. So why is that? So then the curiosity comes in. Then you explore that. Well, we don't know the answer to that. Who does?
Yeah.
And you start to bring in the botanists, you start to bring in the academics, and then why is it so? And you have to talk to the retailers, you have to talk to the distributors, and then could it be otherwise? I mean, basic philosophical questions here.
Yeah.
Could it be otherwise? And then you start to talk to farmers, you start to talk to, politicians, and you start to talk to, really importantly, chefs and food psychologists. And so when you talk to the chefs, they're like, look at, Alice Waters or Alain Ducasse, any of these top chefs are like, of course you can cook a gourmet meal this way. If you just look at any of the big restaurants, there's now more and more vegan, vegetarian, plant-based options, and people love it, all the way to fast food. So we went on this exploration, really, of just saying, we're going to throw ourselves in and we are going to learn along with the reader, because we often feel like all the books are negative, to your original point, or too academic or preachy and just not accessible. And we wanted to make something that was accessible and solution oriented. And I think that's what we did.
Tell me, what was how did you guys collaborate? Did you guys lock yourself in a room and get a whiteboard and talk mostly, or was it a lot of emails back and forth? How did you collaborate on this?
All of the above, because it was during COVID, remember, for a lot of this. So, we were locked in a place, which was both bad and good, because it gave us time on the good side. And the bad side is we didn't have enough time to spend together because of, just protocols. But we, when we could, when those things got lifted, we'd put our masks on and sit in a conference room and then whiteboard things out. Robert has a different type of, mind matrix system that he uses for his creativity that you've probably been, seeing out there. And so he uses one of those. And then so we started going through this kind of mind matrix of what we wanted to cover. And then texting, a lot of voice texts, a lot of, a lot of Zooms, FaceTimes. And when we could, we'd get together and, we'd try and eat.
That's good.
Yeah. We wanted that sensory experience. So we were able to have an excuse to go to dinners and have lunch together a lot. So it was all of the above, really, which is what it takes, What we didn't want to do was sit in a room and say, okay, here's our yellow pad. Now let's lock ourselves in and have this experience. It's just, again, that's a traditional way to do it.
Yeah.
It's a freaking bummer because it's not fun. It's work, and the way to do it is to get out there. We'd go and interview people. We'd have dinners with people. We'd, travel a little bit and have those types of experiences too, to make it, enjoyable for us, that we felt like came through in the text as well.
Yeah. So how long was the writing process? How long did it take you to actually write this book, would you say, from beginning to end?
Yeah, I mean, it's been close to 2 years.
Okay. Yeah, that's a long time. Yeah. And what would you say the hardest part was? I mean, I'm sure the whole thing was challenging, but what was the hardest part of the writing this book, would you say?
What you said, which was, really trying to curate the subjects and the topics. And, we could have written 1,000-page book, as you said. We could
Yeah.
have had a lot more recipes. We could have interviewed a lot more people. We could have had different topics. We could
Yeah.
have gone down the rabbit hole of specific vegetables and, plants and, putting together, because we don't say you have to be 100% anything in this. You
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
mix and match. So we could have gotten into the whole flexitarian thing. We could have gotten to a pescatarian thing. We could have,
Mhm.
just in a whole different way. So it was really about sticking to this path and curating that and winnowing down what we wanted to say.
Do you
And
think
that,
that the way that the book ended up was completely different than when you envisioned it when you first walked on the beach with him, or you think you pretty much kept the core idea? What would you say about that?
yeah, no, we kept the core idea, but like any creative project, it evolves.
Yeah, yeah,
We had visions of being in Brazil and kind of, going through the jungles together and talking to some of the natives and, all of that,
yeah,
who would experience this type of cuisine and then seeing how we would do that in a different place in the world, right? And having that compare and contrast.
mm,
And then that kind of evolved when, again, COVID kind of limited us and threw us in a different direction. And then we didn't have the benefit of some of those experiences, and just time wise,
yeah,
and
yeah,
didn't want to be spending that much in one subject.
yeah,
So
yeah. One question I always am curious with authors is, how do you know when to end it? I mean, I'm sure you could have spent 20 years on this book and you could have spent, easily. How do you know who calls it and who decides, okay, this is the end, this is enough, let's go to let's go to print.
yeah, I snuck that in. Because, you know, I still have to have structure. So I
Uh-huh.
still have to know, like, okay, here's how we're going to start. And the beginning of the book wasn't how I started it. I started off with, I had this elegant thing of like, let's start with seaweed because, human evolution, and we kind of come into the world with sea vegetables, and then we go off into the future. So I had that structure in my head that got thrown out the window. But the end always stuck with me of, okay, what's the future going to be in
Mm,
terms of the food space? And we didn't want to do, we're going to eat bugs, we're going to eat, all fermented stuff. We didn't want to do any of that because that's not accessible and not real. And, most people just want to go in and say, apple or banana.
mm,
Tell
yeah,
me which one.
yeah,
And we did that in the book.
yeah.
But the future of where things are headed and what the possibilities are is where I always thought we could end it. So he was still going, and I said, this could be a good place for us to end, sneaking that in because it teases the future.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, tell me
so
about the reception now. The book's been out for a little while. What's the reception been like? Are you surprised by the reception? Tell me a little bit about that.
yeah, no, we've had, we've been fortunate. We rose to, the number 3 in all of books sold on Amazon.
Wow,
So that,
congratulations.
yeah, yeah. So Atomic Habits is still out there doing its so we rose way up in the charts, which we were pleased about. We've gotten great reception from Kirkus reviews, done some really good like book type of reviews, all the way to more popular reviews from people. Good Morning America, we're on The View with those ladies, and we had fun there doing those types of discussions and
Yeah,
just speaking with different people who have different perspectives on things. For both of us has been a lot of fun. We had a lot of call-ins for something that we did too, and just to hear from people and what they're curious about beyond just Robert's day-to-day life is, is interesting.
Well, do
So
you think, I mean, what do you think what do you think it is that's resonating with people? I mean, is that what you suspected, that whole notion that you pick up a page and there's something compelling on each page? Is that it, or is it something even more fundamental than that?
no, I think that it's kind of free.
Mm,
It's freeing for people, and most people, the reception that we get is, at least I know I'm doing something that's positive.
mm,
And again, this isn't going to be a whole trajectory of you do this and you're 100% good,
yeah,
right? This is part of a whole matrix of life that you have to get on. But at least you go in the store, it's like, okay, if you buy organic, it may not be the best thing. It may not, there may be some confusion about what's organic or not, at least you kind of feel good about that, and it's, or walking on the treadmill. Maybe you're not, sprinting on the treadmill, but you're doing a little walk. You're doing something, and we're trying to impress that adds up and that is healthy for both us and the planet. And so we feel like that kind of accessibility has resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Feel like it's fun, and they love the idea that so much is packed in there, that there's fast facts and that there's recipes and that there's interviews. And so there's a little bit for everyone, and lists and just some things that are unexpected. And we demystify things in the food waste space, which we hadn't planned on writing about, but was one of those things that came up because it's so important. And all the way down to expiration labels, things like that people had no idea. And so a lot of that demystification on food miles, transportation being, such a big thing that people think in terms of a carbon footprint, it isn't. So in the context of food, so it's a lot of these things that is the unexpected, I didn't know that. And then providing information that isn't intimidating, intellectual, jargon that you can get your head around and say, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
And that's empowering, I think, for a lot of people. Say, okay, I'll just do that. Great. And now you're on the right path. If you want to go deeper, go deeper.
So now you and Robert are already talking about the follow-on book or the next book? That's usually what authors do. As soon as they finish one, they're on to the next one. Is that what's happening?
Yeah. He's already said it on every interview. So he would have already said it on this interview. So yeah, he's high on getting us into the next book immediately. So,
I think, but nothing. You're talking about ideas, I'm assuming, or has he?
Yeah.
He's okay.
I have ideas. He has ideas, and we're trying to figure out, when do we? He's a few. If you haven't noticed, he has a few things going on right now, including an Oscar nomination. So he's busy with that, and I want him to stay focused on that as well.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we're kicking around some ideas. I just texted with him before this, and some ideas on what we want to do.
Makes sense. Well, I was going to ask you. So, now that you've written books on your own, obviously you've now co-authored with him. I'm guessing co-authoring is more fun. Will you do more of the co-authoring, or do you kind of like, okay, that's actually more work, and I'd just rather write it myself? What is your opinion on that?
Well, look, Robert and I have a big plan of keeping on doing things together. So I'm kind of stuck with him in a really great way. So I'm pleased with that. And I found someone who, I really admire and like so much and respect as an individual, creatively, professionally, every which way.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how I would possibly replicate that.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of Downey or nothing.
And it sounds like you have the way you described it, it sounds like you have really complementary skills, which really makes the collaborative process good, right? If you were both the same type of journalists, that probably wouldn't be as good. Or if you were both only the creative types, it wouldn't be as interesting.
Yeah, totally. This great like yin and yang type of approach to things. And it just works out that way. Even when we're talking, it's just something gets added, and this collaboration, which is something that I've really focused on lately, is what are the elements of collaboration. And I feel like that's an important topic for a lot of people to focus on, whether they're writing a book or whether they're collaborating with a professional at work or what have you, because I think it's really important to get on the same page when you communicate. Because that type of expression really makes you look at, okay, what are my good skills? Right. And then if you're really good, you'll say, and what are my weaknesses? And, without having ego to be able to say, okay, this person fills those voids for me, and hopefully I do the same for them. And so once I think you start to do this, it's a really, really powerful thing.
Yeah. It also sounds like you just had a lot of fun with it. I don't know. Would you even consider it work? It sounds like you had a lot of fun.
Yeah. It is always work when you get the copy edits back. And so you're going to go, okay, I got to do that. So that's a lot of work, but again, enjoyable, and beyond just the fun of it. And, Robert and I having a good time, and and meeting with really interesting people who are doing such
bet.
great things in the world.
Yeah.
It's a subject that we can sit back, and I said this to him yesterday, is we're actually putting some good out in the world too, or trying to,
Yeah.
so that it's we're not out there just saying for total commercial thing,
Yeah.
buy this book. It's really something that can help we think a lot of people, and hopefully the planet itself.
Yeah. Well, Thomas, I really appreciate your taking the time. Congratulations on this wonderful book. When you do write that next novel, next book with Robert Downey Jr., please come back and tell me about it.
That could be a Freudian slip, by the way. So may have tipped my hand. But thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And we'll definitely circle back on the next one.
This is Richard Hsu and Thomas Kostigen. Thanks.